birth family history, no medical history. And so if you look at my work, you will see that the theme of archives, of having, the means to tell your story, of filling in the blanks is something that you can find a lot. So even when you feel that you are lacking something, which was my case for a long time, like I don't know where I'm from, it can actually be the building block of what story you have to tell, right? My identity informs my artistic, my community, and my scholar work. So if you look at what I do, you will see that I have, for instance, created Adoptee Awareness Month in 2018 for adoptees in the Francophone world, because we were lacking, again, representation, we were lacking community, we were lacking political, theoretical tools to explain what has happened to us, Adoption, family building is political. We are displaced, for some of us, those of us who are transnationally adopted, from one country to another. It's always the same type of families that adopt people, It's kind of a joke, but it's not. You don't see Swedish children being adopted in Ethiopia. So there is a political reason why there is one type of trajectory for children from the global south to the global north, There are political issues, geopolitical issues, economic issues. You don't have to relinquish your child unless something tragic has happened in your life. We rarely look at adoption from this perspective, because for the longest time we're looking at adoption through the perspective of adoptive parents from the global north. So keep that in mind, of always having to see how things work, because that's another reason why I'm really into documentary filmmaking. It's about having a relationship, a conversation with reality. And maybe last but not least, how did I become a filmmaker? Because I wanted to be an actress. But you never get what you want in life, as I often say, if we got our wishes, I would be Whitney Houston. But clearly, this didn't happen either, so, I'm making films, which is still pretty cool. So I went to a drama conservatory in Paris back in 2008, and which was a very ancient time when we are looking at race relations and representation of black people, and especially black women in French cinema and television. So quite quickly, I had an agent, and I would go to auditions, and at some point, I called her, and I was really getting angry and frustrated, and I told her, can you please stop sending me to black auditions, which were auditions where I would be asked to play someone going in or out of prison, a migrant who could speak with the African or Caribbean accent, because as we all know, in the 54 countries of Africa, everybody speaks with the same accent, given that everybody is Francophone. So anyway, so it was really tiring, all the stereotypes of sex worker, drug dealer, etc., etc. And so when I call my agent, she's like, but Amandine, I'm submitting your profile every time it says girl between 18 to 25, but the casting directors are only answering if it says in the screenplay that it's a black character, and if it was saying in the screenplay that it was a black character, it was the aforementioned type of roles. So a friend of mine who was a casting director was like, you will never get the parts you want unless you start writing. And that's how I started writing fiction first. And so it takes us to 2012 when I'm starting to meet producers. So please, please, please be the change we want to see in the world. Because back then, when I would pitch projects where black characters were different, because that was what I did. I started writing projects where there were black characters were, for instance, a black lesbian sommelier, because I'm bisexual and I worked in wine bars for a long time as a manager, so it was basically me. So I had a group of girlfriends in Paris, so it wasn't really, the revolution. It was more like Sex in the City, but in France, And out of the 5 girlfriends, only one was black. So I felt that it was a pretty chill out, way of bringing diversity. But producers, who back then were mostly men in their 50s, white men in their 50s, would always tell me, oh yeah, we love we love the show, we love the characters, but they're really, they're too Anglo-Saxons. Those girls, they don't exist in France. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I exist. I'm pretty sure I'm here, she's in the room with us, the black lesbian sommelier, So then I realized that it was not enough to write. If you wanted to get your perspective on screen, you needed to have power. So I saw almost no hands rising when they asked about who wants to be a producer. And maybe you would want to rethink that, because this is where the money is, and this is where the power is, and this is where you can get to have those stories told. Because you can write everything you want, you can shoot all your documentary filmmakers you want. If you don't have people with power who are championing those stories, and those people tend to be producers, they're the ones with whom, you know, TV networks talk. They won't be talking to you directly, they will be talking to producers. So we need more producers. It's a really urgent political issue too. So I know it doesn't sound sexy, but sometimes you will be surprised. You know, you'll be surprised of all the people who will have access to the industry thanks to you. So maybe that's something to consider. I'm just saying. So by 2012, I'm getting really frustrated, and that's not really my personality. You know, I like to be, you know, like this, like, you know, happy. Like, what can I do? So I was just like, maybe I'm gonna leave France, but before I leave, which is the thing that a lot of black people have done in France, like a lot of people have tried their luck in the UK or in the US. I was like, I'm gonna make a documentary film about what it's like to be a black woman in France, because I know those girls. I know black women who are, you know, training to be actresses, who are nurses, who are scholars, who are whatever, who are queer, who are Muslim and queer. Ooh, poo! And, and so I was like, you know, at least let's make a movie about them, so that I'm leaving something for the next generation. And that's the archive again. You know, I have grown up not knowing about a lot of the struggles from the black feminists in France in the 70s, because those archives had disappeared. And back in 2012, 2014, that's when for a while, a lot of changes have been happening, especially technically. You could now make a movie for $1,000, because we had a Blackmagic Pocket at home that my partner owned, we had a computer, and we had the means to rent microphones. And that's all you need now, you know? And it's not that much money. Like, if you work a summer, you can buy the gear to make your own film. So that was a big difference. I would have never been able to make Speak Up, my first film, when it was on film. But now I could. So I started writing this documentary. I was like, I'm gonna show, and I thought it was gonna be my only film. So I'm also telling you this, it's not your only film, you know? You have time, you don't have to put everything in it. You can make mistakes, and I'm telling you this as I'm telling myself that, you know, like, it's okay, we have time, it can happen. But back then I wasn't sure, I didn't think that. So I was like, I'm gonna put as many black women as I can, and we're gonna cover as many topics as we can, you know, so this way this thing will exist. And so that's how the film was born. I started to recruit on social networks, which is another way of making films that's really interesting now, because Speak Up would not exist without social media. I went on Twitter in 2014 to start building up my profile, and that's another thing for you, you know, especially if you're part of a marginalized community, you cannot think that your work is gonna do the talking. You have to be your own advocate, and you have to start this thing now. One of my biggest power is that I have a big social media following, and that is something that has helped me, you know, sometimes get the things I wanted, because people know that you're gonna be able to publicize your work better, that you're gonna be able to bring a crowd with you. And that's how we got people to fund the post-production of Speak Up. We did a crowdfunding, and we raised almost 15,000 euros to the post-production. And more than 400 people gave money. So it was like, there is a community for this film. And we built the distribution of the film on the community that was gathered for the crowdfunding. So having this mentality too, I know that it may be a lot, because you might be like, oh, I'm an artist, I'm not a businesswoman. And I know that sometimes, you know, maybe that's also because I'm French. You know, in France, there's really this thing of like, ooh, money is dirty, you know? And so I don't want to do stereotypes. Maybe money is less dirty in Switzerland, I don't know. But it's something you have to consider too. Like, how are you gonna get your projects to reach the greater audience? How are you gonna be able to have people around you, follow you, and give you money? Because post-production, like I said, you can make a movie at home, it's true. But if you wanna make a movie that can be screened in theaters, you need roughly between 15 to 20,000 euros. And that's another type of money that I didn't have. And so the film wouldn't have made it to theaters without the crowdfunding. So let's have a look at the trailer of Speak Up, Ouvrir La Voix in French.
le privilège de l'innocence de sa couleur de peau, c'est un peu... J'aimerais bien, on aimerait tous l'avoir, mais bon.
Si t'es noir, tu dois en faire 2 fois plus.
Je voulais avoir les cheveux qui volaient au vent.
Un film avec que des noirs, c'est du communautarisme, alors qu'un film avec que des blancs, bah, c'est un film.
Mais vous venez d'où? Être solide et être debout, ça ne veut pas dire être insensible et être déshumanisé.
On est arrivé à un stade où là, effectivement, il est temps peut-être qu'on prenne la parole et qu'on parle pas à notre place, en fait, finalement.
So as you've gathered with the trailer, Speak Up is a Talking Heads documentary, and that's another thing that I really like to think about when I start a project. What's the best form to reflect what I want to say? So Speak Up is about Black women reclaiming the narrative. It's about being front and center of what we have to say, of not being spoken of or spoken for, but of speaking for ourselves. So that's why we picked the Talking Heads, the documentary genre, because it's kind of a genre that is sort of like looked upon, especially in France. And I think that it's because it's used in television a lot, but it's used in television in a way that I found, often not helpful for the art form. It's because in television, the talking heads are usually just used to sort of like illustrate. You're gonna see the ends of someone, and then you have someone talking to your camera, because a lot of people think that maybe people are gonna change channel if they don't see a face soon. So to me, the thing was like, let's go back to the origin of talking heads. Let's go back to the Krzysztof Kieślowski's film, and to really put people front and center and have a movie when we have almost only talking heads, because that means that it's gonna be the first time in many or a long time that a lot of people will listen to Black women for 2 hours without interrupting them. I was like, that is the power of cinema. It's really rare that people stand up during a movie and go, I disagree! Like in worst case scenario, they just go out. You know what I mean? And that's very powerful. There's a way of building emotion, connection. Like when you get to know someone, then suddenly it's no longer about whether there's racism or not, but it's about this girl that you have really liked for the past 2 hours, and you hope that she's gonna make it as a nurse, And to me, that's the thing that I love also about cinema, about filmmaking, is that you get to have conversations on a different level, deeper level, a more emotional level. And that's where I believe we have the power of changing hearts and minds as well. What I really wanted to do with that film was to create an archive. And the reason why I knew it was important to create archives, especially around moments of struggles, is because of 2 films. The first one is called, oh my God. The first one is called Sisters in the Struggle. It's from Dion Brown and Jeannie Steichman. It's a Canadian film. And it's about Black feminists in Canada. It's about their movements and struggles in the 70s and 80s. And the other one is called A Place of Rage, and it's from Pratibha Parmar, and it's also a 1991 film, but it's about the struggles of Black women and activism in the US. And what I learned about those films and why they were made is because a lot of those women were aware of the stories of women from the civil rights era, Black women, who got erased from the history because Black men were put front and center, because most of them were mobilizers, so talking at the, on the microphone and stuff, and Black women were organizers. They were doing the work behind the scenes. But you would never have had all those people hearing Martin Luther King speak if there were not all those women organizing behind the scene. So the next generation, they made film about the struggles from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, in the 90s, to make sure that they would not be erased, that we would know what happened. And so that's what motivated me to make Speak Up. The last thing was that I refer to Speak Up as a guerrilla film, because I don't know if you know about this approach. It was coined by Melvin Van Peebles. So Melvin Van Peebles started as an actor in Hollywood and then became a filmmaker, and he got really frustrated with what he had to do in Hollywood as a filmmaker. So he decided to make a film with his own money and the money of the Black community. So this was in the 1970s, and he managed to enlist a lot of famous Black actors and comedians of the time who would finance the film. And the idea was that he was going to make a film about a Black man who was an outlaw and who would escape the police at the end and leave. you know? And so this film is called Sweet Sweetback Badass Song, and he wrote then a manifesto after making the film called Sweet Sweetback Badass Song, a guerrilla filmmaking manifesto. Again, I recommend reading it because it will give you a lot of like motivation, and you see how he's made the film, and you can see that there are many ways of thinking about, you know, raising money for a film. Speak Up did really well in theaters. We did almost maybe 20,000 tickets sold. So for a first film that was self-produced, self-distributed, about black women, which was supposed to be a niche market, that was pretty good. And so that opened the doors for us to the filmmaking industry, the classic cinema industry, with Charles Gilibert from CG Cinéma, who came to meet us. And when I say us, I want to say Enrico Bartolucci and I. Enrico is my creative partner. He's the DP and editor of both movies, so Speak Up and A Story of One Zone, that I'm going to talk about later. And we're also a life partner, and we're also business partner, because we created a production company to put Speak Up in theaters. So we met Charles in the months following the release of Speak Up in theaters, and we already had the project to make another film, this time a film about transnational adoptees. So again, same logic. Adoptees have been spoken of and spoken for a very long time, and a lot of people to this day are referring to adoptees as children, adopted children. I'm 40 years old. I am no longer a child, but I'm still an adoptee. So I really wanted to have the perspective of adult adoptees on screen. And again, you know, what is the best way to tell this story? We go back to the archives. Adoptees rarely have archives of their life before their adoptions, or they are, you know, like very little archive. But then once we get adopted, quite often our families document us a lot, because they've been expecting us. They've been waiting for longer than like a pregnancy. You know, sometimes you are on list for 4 years and stuff. So I didn't know about that. I thought that everybody got photographed and filmed as much as I did as a child. And then as I grew up, I realized that my non-adopted friends had far less archives, you know, from, in my case, 5 months to forever until I, you know, left my parents' house. And I was like, ooh, that's a good way to tell the story. Let's make an archival film about transnational adoption. And this time we're going to do exactly the opposite. It is still a documentary about with people speaking, but we are not going to have any talking heads. Let's try and see if we can make an archival film that is only made up of archives. You know, I had been really strongly impressed with Goran Olsson's Concerning Violence and the films that are doing that. And the idea for me is always to see how we can push the boundaries, you know, how we can go and do something that is formally audacious, but because the themes are so emotional, people are not even going to realize that they haven't seen one face, or they're going to realize after a while, they're going to be like, oh, but we didn't see a talking head. But no one, again, left the cinema being like, ooh, I want to see someone's face. You know, like, it does not happen. So the archives were also a way to tell 3 different layers of perspectives on adoption. So in the film, we have archives from the media, to represent the global discourse on adoption. We have archives that are made by the adoptive family when the adoptees are young, or let's say until they are no longer minors. And then we have archives made by the adoptee themselves. And in the film, the people are between 26 and 53 years old. So the idea for me was, again, to have this dialogue, you know. What is it like to be represented one way in the media? What is it like to be seen one way by your family? And then what is it like to produce a discourse on yourself, you know, through images, especially because we are in an era of archival making. You know, every day we post on social media. You know, we take photos of the time. And this thing of like seeing the archive as a tool of the present, that it's, you know, like interrogating the past, but also interrogating like the past in the making that we are always sharing everywhere, was really interesting for me. So I was like, let's go and have this representation of adoption. This way, again, we're going to flip the script. It's going to be only adoptees talking about adoption. For the longest time, we were not part of the conversation. So in this film, you won't have any specialist. You won't have any mental health counselor. You won't have any adoption agency. You won't have any adoptive parents. You're only going to hear about adoptees and their perspective on adoption. So let's look at the trailer from A Story of One Zone, it's called.
A
Je suis né au Brésil. J'ai fait plusieurs crèches et orphelinats au Brésil. Donc j'ai vécu une répétition d'abandon durant ma première année.
J'ai pris conscience de mon adoption vers l'âge de 5 ans.
À partir du moment où j'ai su que j'étais adoptée, donc je savais bien qu'ils étaient venus me chercher quelque part.
Quand je suis descendu de l'avion, j'ai tout de suite voulu rentrer au Rwanda.
J'ai jamais senti en fait vraiment de différence entre le fait que moi je suis adoptée et pas les autres en fait.
Je me suis construite comme une enfant blanche finalement. Comme une enfant blanche de l'intérieur et asiatique de l'extérieur.
J'aurais dû montrer différemment que j'avais besoin d'amour. La façon que j'ai adopté, c'était de faire des bêtises.
Pour moi, ce qui fait famille, c'est les liens qu'on peut avoir avec les gens. Clairement, moi, c'est pas les liens du sang.
Niyongira, le petit Rwandais, à l'époque, je dirais que je l'ai fait taire quand même.
Toujours ce sentiment de n'être ni vraiment française, ni vraiment coréenne. D'avoir, comme on dit, le cul entre deux chaises, quoi. De pas savoir où est vraiment sa place.
Quand on parle avec les gens de l'adoption, c'est toujours grâce à nos parents, on a eu une famille. Et jamais que grâce à nous, nos parents ont eu un enfant.
On n'est pas une coquille vide qui arrive et tu le formates à ton image.
C'était un moment clé où j'ai décidé que j'allais intégrer toute cette partie de mon histoire, en faire une espèce de grande histoire avec les deux familles.
On vient de quelque part et on est le fruit d'une histoire avant et de choses avant. On vient de quelqu'un.
So another thing that you'll notice if you watch the film one day is that there's no voiceover, and it's the case for both films, because I believe that it's also really powerful to try and build the narratives through your character's voice, instead of trying to fill in the gaps or whatever with like a written commentary. To me, everything in a film should make sense or should have a purpose, you know, and it should not be, for instance, I hate illustrative music. Like, one of the things I hate the most about commercial North American cinema is music to tell you when you have to cry. So many times I'm about to cry, and then there's like 3 notes of piano, ding, 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 and I'm just like, and you just killed my emotion. You know, like, I know when I want to be sad, or I know when I want to laugh and stuff. So I believe that, for instance, audiovisual has a meaning, right? And so music should be like, okay, I'm talking about music because for Speak Up, we had no money. So there was no music. And the only music we could put in was the rhythm of the editing. So Speak Up is editing in jump cut because we were like, oh, we're gonna try to find something to create rhythm in the film because we didn't have money for music. But then, because the second one was in the cinema industry, there was money for music. And so that was great because we had always wanted to work with musicians. I think that it's great to take a musician that's not necessarily making film music and to give them a pitch and give them a feel and to find musicians that make sense for you. So for A Story of One's Own, we asked Arnaud Dolmen, who is from Guadeloupe and is a drummer. And he's a great composer because he's really mixing, you know, all the influences from traditional Guadeloupean music and jazz. And because his music has jazz influence, it was a bit melancholic. And because of the themes from the film were melancholic, I also wanted something more punchy. And at times, because that was a dream for Speak Up, I believe in like musical explosions. You know, I like in films when there's sometimes like just the music goes like, you know, like that, and you were not expecting it. I really love that. So I was like, oh, who could do that for us? And so we asked Ife, because Oturamun, the leader of Ife, is an adoptee, is a Black American adoptee, and then he found the Yoruba religion, and he became a priest in the Yoruba religion, and I really liked this idea of like how you build your identity as an adoptee, you know, all the things we go and we bring, and I thought that there would be a great pair in the film to create an ambiance. So that's how we picked them for the film, for the music. And the same thing for the voiceover. For me, it's like, you know, I would say like a classic way of thinking about it would be Agnès Varda or Chris Marker. If you have voiceover in your film, then it should be a statement from my perspective. But I'm not gonna add voiceover just because, you know, to fill in the blanks. This I'm not interested in. So I'm gonna try and see if we can make the people talk and stand on their own. And then the last thing we did on this one, because yes, there was more money, so we did all the things that we were dreaming of before, is that I talked to you about concerning violence. And if you watch Black Power Mixtape, which is the film that Goran Hugo Olsen made before, and it was also an archival film, it's a good film, but concerning violence is so much better. You know, the graphic design is amazing, and we were like, Enrico and I were like, what changed, what's changed? So we watched the credits, and in the credits, we saw that he worked with a graphic designer from Sweden who is a superstar and who's really good, and we were like, oh, we should go and find, you know, a designer too, you know, who could help us link all these perspectives on the film, work on the titles. So we worked with Constance Guisset and Lucie Verlaguet, and they did an amazing job with the titles and the design. So to me, it's really this as well, to try again to think of form always in relationship to the story you want to tell, to the feelings you want to give to the people watching your film or your series. And so after this program, I realized that I was really at home in documentary filmmaking, because for me, it's the space where I can tell, document, and preserve the stories and the realities of groups that are usually silenced, marginalized, and erased from history. So that was something that made me feel like documentary was a way forward, but I was maybe missing because it's France, and France has a really strong partition between art house cinema and television, you know? And while television is the most popular way of, you know, reaching people, like you can make ratings in televisions that you would never dare dream making in cinema theaters. And to me, that's another thing that we need to address as artists, is who do we want to talk to? You know, what is most important for you? Maybe it's most important for you to go to a category A festival because, you know, who doesn't like red carpets and champagne? You know, like I like it too. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna lie. But maybe it's more important for you to be sure that your grandmother can see what you've made because it's gonna be screened on TV. So I had like desire for TV for a long time, and those first two works brought me to the third one, where I was recruited on a project about the House of Revlon in Paris. So for those of you who are not familiar with the ballroom community, ballroom is an art form, but it's also a family building kind of phenomenon. It was started in the US in the 70s and 80s by trans Latinx and Black women. Usually they were coming from the pageant world, and in the pageant world, like in drag queen pageant world, white trans women were always winning the beauty contests, and so the Latinx and Black women decided to create their own space. And they created those spaces in ballroom houses, like like where you go dance tango and stuff. And those competitions became more than glamour competitions. They became dance competition. They became fashion shows. Basically, the idea was that everything that queer trans people could not do in the regular society, they could do it in the ballroom houses. And they would be their own judges, and they would have those competitions where they would win like really big prizes. So for those of you who would like to see the story of ballroom, I think two major shows are Pose on the fiction side, which is, you know, telling this story. And then on the documentary side, there is Paris is Burning, which is a documentary that is also telling this story beautifully. So this is the US in the 70s and 80s. And in 2010, 2012 in Paris, ballroom arrives, and because France has a huge Black North African community, among which there are, of course, queer people, ballroom takes off really quickly. And now France is the second biggest scene of ballroom in the world. And so Nasser Sari, who's a young producer, and Elina Gakugomba, who's a screenwriter, met. And Elina and I were working on a fiction project. And so Nasser had already had the idea for ballroom, and he recruited Elina because he wanted a documentary with like a more of a fiction feel. And Elina was like, I think you should recruit Amandine as a director. And so that's how I ended up working on ballroom. And so we wrote the show, Elina and I, and then we started shooting it almost straight away. And so it has given this 5 by 30 minutes docu-series on the ballroom scene, and it's called Ballroom, and we're gonna watch the trailer now.
Le voguing, c'est un feeling. C'est ton cœur qui parle. On va dans des balls, c'est pour s'affronter. Let's not play.
On gagne, on perd, mais au-dessus de tout, on crée des moments.
Si je meurs, qu'on se dise « Bitch, I remember her ».
Dans la House of Revlon, il y a moi,
Gigi,
Lekiona,
écoutez
et les kids. On est racisés, on est queer, c'est pas facile tous les jours.
C'est une lutte constante. Il n'y a pas des gens comme ça dans les bureaux où on va.
Depuis tout petit, genre, je savais ce que je voulais être. Je voulais être une star.
So again, as you've heard, music plays a big part in this show too. It had to, because music plays a big part in the ballroom scene. And again, we worked closely with two people who really made sense for me. The first one is Ouvrir La. She's a composer, she's an amazing composer. She has her own practice as a music creative. And I actually knew her first as a music creative, but she composes a lot for film too, for film and television. She's amazing, and she understood the assignment perfectly. Like the opening credits the song is a banger. Like I never saw it. Like the second, we did 2 episode screenings, like for the for the preview of the series, and for the second one, people were like clapping during the opening credits with the music. So I was like, okay, that good song, that works. And the second musician we worked with is called Lazy Flo, and Lazy Flo is a DJ from the ballroom scene, which is a thing that's really important. I've quoted Paris is Burning, and Paris is Burning is a film that is cult because it's beautiful, and it was shot during the AIDS HIV crisis. So a lot of the people who are featured in the documentary died shorter after it was shot, and so it's also like it's another very important piece of archive. But the filmmaker from Paris is Burning has been decried in the ballroom community for a long time because she was a white woman, and she benefited a lot, you know, her career benefited a lot from this film that was iconic, and the people who were featured in the film didn't benefit in any way, shape, or form. So for us, it was really important for ballroom to involve people from the community. So Vinny Revlon, who's the house father from the House of Revlon, is an artistic director on this series, is credited for it because it's really important. Like if you want to build a career in the film or TV industry, well then he can come back and he already has a credit. And so those things to me are important. I'm sharing them with you because especially in the documentary film, for the longest time, there was a tendency for extractivism. You know, like it was very nice to go and film the queers and the blacks and stuff when they're dancing, but then who's having a career? Who's making money? You know, whose life has been represented well enough so that it doesn't destroy them afterwards? You know, and so this level of care, these ethics should always be at the center of your practice. It's not about telling the story. It's about making sure that everyone is okay afterwards. It's about making sure that, you know, it's not just you benefiting. And again, that's my perspective, but on this, I think I'm right. And so that's it. Well, that's it. And so the last thing I want to talk about with ballroom is that, again, we have heavily relied on everyone's social media presence to publicize this show, okay? Kiona, the house mother of the Revlon house, she won Drag Race season 2 in France, so she has, I don't know how many followers on social media. Vinny is an international ambassador of ballroom, so he also has a lot of people following him. I have a bit less, but I have a few. And so the thing is that it was very important for us to have a strategy and to like make sure that we would cross-post everything and that the trailers would be widely seen, etc. So I think, again, like build, you know, like find all the strengths you have in a given project. You know, sometimes the people who are, you know, in your projects are your biggest publicists. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So I think that throughout this presentation, I've given you examples and strategies that are rooted in who I am. So you will need to, so that you can understand that you need to find your strategies, right? If you are not a cisgender, white, heterosexual man from a film, family, or dynasty, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna take time, and you will need to be creative and inventive. Again, the reason why I told you don't think that your work is gonna do the talking, because that's what I thought. I was like, I'm serious. Like the stuff I'm doing is solid, so it's gonna work. That is not how it works. So you really need to be your biggest advocate. One of the things that has helped me stay motivated in this career, because again, I started by saying marathon, okay, is that I started to look at people who were similar to me. Because when I was younger, I was looking at the careers of white men, and I was just getting depressed. I was like, how come this guy made a feature-length film at 23 years old? And, oh, I suck. So then I started looking at black women. And what happened? Some of my favorite directors, I realized they had the same type of path as I had. So I'm going to show you some examples. Alice Diop directed 7 documentaries between 2005 and 2021 before releasing her first feature-length fiction, Saint-Omer. But Saint-Omer won Grand Prix at the Venice Film Festival and the César for Best First Film. So, it's okay to take 7 films to make a feature-length fiction drama. It's all good. Toni Morrison wrote her first novel at 39 years old, which didn't prevent her from winning the Nobel Prize for Literature 23 years later. Or Justine Triet, who made 3 documentaries and 1 short fiction between 2007 and 2012. And then, as you all know, Anatomy of a Fall, whose list of awards I'm not going to go into, but still, Palme d'Or at Cannes and Oscar for Best Screenplay is pretty good, even if there was only those 2, that was nice enough, That is our first feature-length fiction film. So what can we learn from these 3 career paths? That we need to, if you want to compare yourself or inspire yourself, do so with the trajectories of people who resemble you. So it helps you remember it's a marathon, and to stay, healthy till the end of the marathon, you should not start like you're doing a sprint, right? You need to identify the potential obstacles and ways to overcome them regarding to who you are. So for me, because I knew it was going to take a long time, I have many plans. And I have many careers. I am an author, as you've been told at the beginning. I am a speaker, as you can see now. And when I say speaker, I go get my money where it is. I have been doing a lot of, before the Trump era, one of the things that was making me the most money was working in multinational companies during, Women's History Month, Black History Month, anything that has to do like that, like what used to be DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And this was very lucrative, and that was a way of getting my freedom. I'm giving you this example because if you are expecting to get your freedom from making, art house documentaries, it's not gonna happen. This is not where the money is. Just to clarify, the money is not there. And so you also need to see with what you are comfortable. Like me, I have no problem going to those big corporations to get money, knowing that it is not about changing the world. Like, they just want to say that they had a black woman during Black History Month. Like, no one is fooled. But if they give me enough money, I'm happy about it. I will be your token for 5,000 euros. There is no problem about it. And then I will go make my films. So you need to see, what is your way of sustaining your career. You need to understand, like where you can find freedom. Again, if you don't have family money, if you have family money, well, then enjoy and go how you want. I also say that because I think that thinking about managing your career can help you, make all types of choices. For instance, I have chosen not to produce children, but if you are thinking about building a family, knowing that it usually takes 10 years and 3 to 5 films to get your career off the ground will help you plan when you want to start build a family. for instance, you know, and all those things, again, how to deal with your money. And then those examples have also shown us that practice makes perfect. So I really, really, really believe in the strong, in the good enough mentality. I am not trying to make my magnus opus with every project. I'm trying to finish a project, you know? I think one of the things that helped me the most in my career is that I once saw Spike Lee Masterclass, and he said, finishing a film is a miracle, so making a good film is, you know, and I was just like, oh my God, you know, if Spike Lee says that, you know, I'm just like, and I think we should really consider that. Getting to the finish line, taking your film to audiences is already so, such a struggle that, you know, if you're trying to make it perfect too, you are probably gonna crumble, you know, under the pressure. So just go for the finish line, and then, you know, your films will be good. Like, I think Justine Triet is the best example. Look all her feature lengths in order, and see how good she gets every time. Every time, like how everything is getting, you know, one film, it's the actor direction that gets better. Another time, it's the editing or whatever. And so I think that's really interesting to think about that, you know. Your films are your film school, you know. It's the continuation of your film school. They're not like your magnus opus, again. Learn to manage the low points. Our careers are always up and down. No one does that, you know? And so you need to manage the low points also, because the low points are moments where you can rest. And I'm telling you this because I've been especially bad at managing my low points, because I was afraid of not getting the next gig, of not getting enough money. And then I got really stressed last year because I was doing a docuseries while writing a book. You do not want to do that, you know? Like, this is a lot, and it nearly broke me. So, you know, if I had rest better the previous year and a half, when I was less, you know, having less contracts or less opportunities, I would have come with a greater energy to face this moment. And I know it's hard, but it's always, you know, like, if you are working seriously, if you are working consistently, the work is gonna come. So it's really important to rest. You know, when work is not coming, if you're not totally broke, and again, I am really not the best financial planner. Like, I'm just saying those things because I don't want to be like, and I got my shit figured out, so I am sharing this with you. It is more like, I have made all those mistakes, and now I'm sharing with you. Okay, just so that we're clear. And another thing is that it's good to embrace the fact that nothing goes as planned, especially in documentary, because that's the case in life. But in documentary, it's always the case. And so one of the things that has helped me is to think about it as a game. You know, it's like the constraint has to become a guideline for your project. So I'm gonna give you an example. Ballroom, we wrote more in detail this project than my two previous projects. And so we had two characters who were supposed to be like our ingenue, and so that they would help the audience understand the ballroom culture. And the second day of shooting, one of my two ingenues got kicked out of the house. And so all my storyline crumbled before my eyes, you know? And I was just like, okay. So like those things keep happening. They will always happen, etc. But so it has to be a thing of like, oh, what can I tell now, and how can I go with this? And I feel that documentary filmmaking, I am a planner, and it's helped me. But planning is also about trying to feel that you have some control in life when really you don't have any. And the documentary has really helped me in life, accepting that, no, you don't have any control. And so you will work with what you have. You will edit what you manage to shoot, and that's it, and it's okay. You know? And then the last thing I would say is to learn to manage juggling multiple projects simultaneously. If you want to eat, you need to be able to have like 3 projects in development while you are making one and having a few side hustles. So I know that it's a lot and it can sound stressful. Having projects in development doesn't mean that they have to be like further along, very developed, but you need to think of your career as all these steps so that it will help you, like when you have conversations, you never know who you're gonna meet. So if you have 2 or 3 ideas and stuff, you never know who you're gonna meet and you're gonna be able to pitch because you have all those things in standby, and maybe that project that you really wanted to do 8 years ago it's finally the moment to do it. So, try to keep all those things in mind, but while also keeping in mind that doing too much will lead you to burnout. I do not have the answer of where is the right balance, but that's something you need to know. So basically, that was me trying to show you who I am through my work and how my work has taught me how to drive my career. And now I hope you have questions so that I can help you have a long, fruitful documentary or whatever filmmaking career. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, big audience, yes. So we really have time to have a conversation with reality, as you said. I think it's a very nice way to look at filmmaking. Thank you so much. We can also pass 2 microphones if it's needed. It's here? Yes. Please also introduce yourself just quickly so we know who you are.
Hello, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I'm Raphael, filmmaker. And my question is, maybe it's difficult to answer, but where do you get all that energy and, I would say, positivity while watching reality on its rough part also? So I guess you take something in life also that fulfills you. So I was interested in how you manage with all of this.
Okay. So of course, this is a presentation setting. This is a performance setting. So I am not always like this. Also, thankfully, I think for my entourage, good morning. I am a bit like this, but I'm not always, like this. I think that for me, the energy comes from the fact that I get to meet a lot of people. Like, you get what you give, sort of. And it's a true thing, especially when you work in documentary. I haven't told you, but for Speak Up, I met 45 black women, and then 24 in the film. For A Story of One Zone, we made 93 adoptees. We recorded 42 life stories, and then 6 people are in the film. For Ballroom, in the house, there's roughly, it's fluctuating, so I would say there's around 30 people in the house. And every time we make films or projects, I believe, like I said, in spending time with people. I don't believe in coming and getting your story. So for instance, for the House of Revlon, we spent maybe a month and a half with Elina doing pre-interviews, but also going to all their trainings without camera, getting to know them, going to their balls. I always invite people in my house, for Speak Up, for Story of One Zone, for Ballroom. Because I feel like I'm coming to your house. I'm filming you. You are telling me your most intimate secrets and stuff. I have to give you something back in exchange. My partner, Enrico, on top of being like a technician, creative person, filmmaker as well and stuff, he's Italian and he cooks very well. So yeah, sorry, a lot of cliches in this talk, but it happens. It so happens. So we make pizza at home and we make people meet each other. And for instance, in A Story of One Zone, but also I think for Speak Up, it was the first time for black women. It was because Paris is really expensive, so it was hard to meet in a big apartment all together. So a lot of us knew each other from social media, but we had never met. For A Story of One Zone, most people who came to the first pizza evening, it was their first time in a room with other adoptees. So it was a very emotional night and it was very intense. And for Ballroom, they're coming for brunch and stuff. So I think that's what makes me also hopeful, because I do a lot of tours. Like I've toured with Speak Up extensively. I've done maybe 120 screenings with Q&A in like 10 different countries. And because I grew up in the countryside, I also like to go to the countryside. And sometimes it's gonna give you like those, I wasn't really surprised because I know that because there's not that much culture when you're really in the country, people tend to come. But I've gone to like really rural areas and the whole village was there, like only white people and mostly working in the agricultural field, and the mayor of the village is there, and it's something, to see. I think that helps me have hope, like you go and you get to meet people and you get messages as well. Of course, there's hate, there's there's social media harassment and stuff, and it's a discipline to look at what's positive. I don't succeed all the time. If you read the books, I have like massive depressive events. Like all the people make a lot of jokes. It's because there is another side. Like all the light you can see here, there's the same in not so a bit. So it's not always, but like that's where I get the feeling that it does work. I think what I like the most about film is that you can see people change. Like Vinny, for instance, the father from the House of Revlon, he's gotten so many messages from parents of queer youth, of black queer youth who were like, oh, now I understand what you go through, and I wish you could like adopt my son in your house and stuff. So you can see those things change. Or someone I know who's not an activist and who is more conservative, and he was like, well, I watched your thing about ballroom, He was like, I watched your thing, well, I kind of, had to get over, the gay thing, but then it was really nice, and I really loved them, and my favorite, she's Giselle, and I was like, okay, so I feel that if you get to this point, and you don't get offended, because that's the thing, so the more you're gonna go and see people who are not from your group, the more you're gonna hear things that are maybe ignorant, maybe, don't expect to hear terms that we are using. But all I wanna see is the humanity, If you can tell me that, basically you're telling me I was uncomfortable, but I watched it anyway, out of, respect and love for you, which I think is nice, that people are like, okay, I don't feel like watching black queer people, but I'm gonna watch it because it's you, and once you've watched it, you've let yourself be touched. Well, I've made a little inroad, It's not gonna change everything, but that gives you, at least that gives me a lot of energy, yeah.
Thank you very much. Another question, remark. Don't hesitate, please.
It can be a commentary. You don't have to, it can be anything.
Hello, I'm Marianne. You mentioned guerrilla cinema a bit earlier, and I was wondering whether there was a difference in your experience in managing to make a film with little money and managing to have it seen and reaching the audience of a film made this way.
You mean comparing to making it in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, and I want to learn from you about that, is it's easier to make a film than having it shown widely.
Yeah, because like I said, now you can buy gear for very low costs. So the challenge now is access. So when you look at cinema, in France at least, if you want to be considered as a national release, which is again another thing, because there's sort of two ways of distributing in France. Either you're in the regular circuit, which is the national release circuit, and again, this has an impact on your career, this is sort of the serious, real industry. Or you have all the films that tend to be more political films and stuff, and they are just commercial screenings. So they may be doing a big tour in France, but they are not counted in the National Center for Cinematography, sort of when they are counting all the theater tickets sold in the year and stuff. You are in a parallel circuit. So I didn't want to be there. I wanted to have a national release. And one of the rules to have, so there's many rules. So to be distributed in theaters, you need to be a production company with 45,000 euros of, no, not to be distributed, but to get money from the National Center for Cinematography. So basically in France, there is a public funding of cinema. And so a bit of the money you're gonna get is gonna be based on the theater tickets you've sold. But to get this money, you need to have what's called an agrément de production, so production agreement from the National Center of Cinematography. And the production companies that are eligible to this status are the production companies with 45,000 euros of capital. So basically, when we started a production company with Enrico, and we knew nothing, and that's another problem. You know, when we wanted to distribute Speak Up, we knew that we needed like a visa d'exploitation, so I don't know how you said that in English, but like a thing that said that you can go in theaters. We knew that the film had to be, you know, edited, not edited, but like the sound editing, like you need to have 5.1 Dolby mixing, and you need to have like color correction of a particular type for the cinema screens. So these things we knew we needed. And then what we didn't know is that to have a national release, you need to be released in more than 10 cinemas in France or in one cinema in Paris. And the one cinema in Paris rule is it's a Hunger Games, right? Like when you are trying to get a cinema theater to release your film in Paris, it's really, really tough. So basically, the thing that helped us is that we live in Saint-Denis in France, which is a city near Paris. And Boris Spire, who is the head of the Saint-Denis cinema called L'Écran, he really helps local filmmakers, people from the city. So he was like, I'm giving you, so we picked a date together, and so we were like, yeah, the film is gonna be released on October 11th, and he was like, at least this way you already have one cinema theater. And then I distributed it old school, because in France you also have an association of all the independent screen theaters in France, so you can find their email, their phone number, and their address. So I took that, and then I called all of them, and I was like, my film is gonna be released on October 11th, and it's already got like one theater, and do you want to see the screener, or do you want a DVD? And then I would harass them until I got roughly 7 theaters in France who said that they would release the film as a national release. And then we got a theater in Paris, I have no idea how, but there was, back in the day, Dobrila Diamantis at Saint-André-des-Arts, and she was like, yeah, I'll take it. And I was like, yes, we have Paris. So now we had a national release, even though we didn't have 10 theaters yet. And then the last step was that Juliette Redzer, who is from Trois Couleurs, which is the magazine for the MK2 cinemas in France, I don't remember how I think she heard of the film because of the crowdfunding, and she asked me for a screener, and she really liked it, and so she pestered Bertrand Roger from MK2 to watch it, and he's the programmer for MK2. And I often say that MK2 made us, because the Sunday before the release, Bertrand called me and said, oh, we're gonna put the film at MK2, Beaubourg, and Quai de Loire, and it ended up being, we did like 8,000 theater tickets at MK2 Beaubourg, which was unheard of. I think we stayed for 8 weeks there. So it was a thing of like, pure grit and hustle and learning on the go how, what are the rules. But then the rules we learned afterwards was that we were not gonna get any of the money that people usually get from the CNC after we had done so many tickets sold, because back then we didn't have 45,000 euros of capital. What happened is that then the film was taken by MK2 for international and TV sales, and when we started making money with TV sales, then we did a capital augmentation for the company, so that we could then, for the next film, get the money from the CNC. So it is possible, but if you look at all the people who've done guerrilla films style movies, I think of Jean Carena with Donoma, I think of Rachid Jaidani with Rangen, I think of a few others, and you look at them in terms of career, how many movies have they done after that? Well, they have kind of disappeared because there are all those rules. And who has the financial solidity within the black communities, to have a production company with 45,000 euros and stuff like that? Well, clearly not enough people. And so I would say that you can do it, but it's kind of like a one-shot. Had Charles not come to us to make the second film, I don't think there would have been a second film. And then for TV, I feel that that there's no way in. TV, there is no way of, unless building your own network. You cannot, because one of the things that worked for Speak Up is that people were going to see the film in theaters. So I had an argument, to be like, the theater is full. So you cannot tell me it's niche. But on TV, you cannot be like, ooh, there's so many people on my YouTube channel, so that's the proof that you should hire me. So I feel that's why I said, we need producers and stuff. I feel that there is no way in for TV. You need people that are already within to come and get you.
Thank you very much. And I can only say she speaks the truth. That's a good. Yeah, there are many producers in Switzerland who have some family money. If we are honest, we won't say names, but that's true. So it's about getting our own place and our own space of expression, artistic expression, but also engagement. I think it's really true. So I'm very happy that you give us all these tools and energy and courage. Les questions, vous pouvez aussi les poser en français parce que Amandine, vous avez compris, elle parle parfaitement le français.
I can also speak English like this. This way, everybody understands.
So, yes.
Merci. I can go English also. It's a very simple question, but we didn't spoke about the books yet. So I just wanted to know, at what point did you have the will to go to another way of making art, and why did you choose literature? Like, what is the difference? And will you do more in the future? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Well, I think that one of the things I love the most about books is freedom. Because I think it was a few years ago, a journalist asked Virginie Despentes why she was not trying to make films anymore. And she was like, because there are too many authorizations to ask, and too many people to ask, and too many people who are trying to come within your work, you know? When you're a writer, you need to convince a publisher, and you need to convince your editor. That's two people. And if they trust you, then you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. Of course, the risk is smaller, right? In film, even in documentary, we are talking about, you know, tens of thousands of euros to make a documentary and stuff. While for a book, they're gonna give you, you know, a few thousand euros for your advance, but that's the only risk they're taking. So of course you have more freedom, you know. But the thing is, I was, like I said, I don't like to feel frustrated, and I understood that I could only go so far in the film industry in terms of expressing myself. And I also felt a responsibility to the people in the films, because if I'm asking you, again, to share a lot about your life, and if we are from the same type of path, I need to be sharing as well, you know? And I felt that it was important to, I had been writing a lot about, you know, blackness and being a black woman on my blog and on social media and stuff when I met Speak Up. So we were sort of like even with the participants. But when I made A Story of One's Own, I hadn't talked about my adoption publicly a lot. I had been, you know, waiting because I felt like I was not ready for a long time to have people be like, oh, she's so angry on racial issues because her parents are white, you know? Like, and so I was like, I'm just not gonna talk about it. And when I made the film, I was like, nah, I wanna talk about it, and also things that, you know, simmered, were clearer in my mind. And I really wanted to talk about reproductive justice. I felt also, because I've been, you know, living, working between North America and France for a good 10 years now, I was getting annoyed that so many theories that are helpful for us, so many perspectives did not exist in the Francophone world. And I was like, I want to talk about reproductive justice. I want to talk about childism. And I want us to have those words and those tools in French. So that was like all the reasons to write a book. And it was a space, for instance, the first book, it's written in the universal feminine. You know, I was like, why do we always have to, you know, read stuff that are in the universal masculine, you know? And so, well, you know, that was a big way, you know, space of freedom and creativity and how you make it work, you know? And with this second book, it's also the same thing. It really helped me, actually, because there are more constraints in TV. And I think that one of the things that really helped me while I was making Ballroom was to write my book, because there was a space where I could be totally myself, where I was free to, you know, like experiment. This time I've worked with, you know, hyphenated writing, inclusive writing, and I've also been trying to improve my writing, because I'm thinking that I would like to go into first, I think, short forms, and at some point a novel, and so. I feel, yeah, that it's a place where it's, again, easier to experiment, one of the things that I find tough in the film industry, especially when I haven't been to film school. You know, I think that one of the things that's great that Anita was talking about at lunch is that here you get to do a lot of short films. You know, so you get to try your hand and to work regularly. But when you're a filmmaker working professionally, I'm making a film every 4 years. And I have never been on a set, you know, even for a short film with actors and, you know, like, so acting directions and stuff, like, it's hard to, you're not training. And, you know, like, again, practice makes perfect. So if you don't get to practice, then you're gonna sort of, I feel, kind of lose your touch creatively. So to me, writing books is a way of, like, I never lose touch, you know. I'm working, I'm exercising my mind and stuff, you know, like, that's why I want to go also to literature, because short form to me is really cinematic. You know, short form, you have to be really efficient, give, you know, good images, and that's a good way of keep training for you know, like drama, for fiction. So that thing, that's why I like this space.
So we have time for one last question, and Amandine will stay here. And tonight, just behind this curtain, there will be the short films of the students to discover tonight. Short film documentaries, but also fiction. And the teachers are in the back there, Mariam and Hassan, who will, with the students, introduce the films. So who grabs the chance to ask one last question, personal, if you want? Nora?
I've had the privilege to know Amandine since 2017 or 18, et tu es un phare. Tu es littéralement un phare dans ce monde et dans l'industrie du film. Donc simplement un très très grand merci de tout cœur. Voilà.
Merci, merci. Ouais, pour les timides, vous pouvez venir me parler pendant que je fais les dédicaces.
Absolument. Donc, les deux messieurs vous attendent, si vous voulez, pour les livres et une dédicace personnelle. Pardon. Yes, so there will be book signing just now, and we will go on with cocktail. As we are a festival, and because we create the festivals ourselves to show our films, so 6:45, the cocktail just behind the curtain, getting prepared.